Hawaii's ocean floor just erupted, and what came out of it was not supposed to be possible. On February 15th, 2026, Kilauea volcano launched lava fountains 1,312 feet into the sky. That is taller than the Empire State Building, taller than the Eiffel Tower. And it happened not once, but as part of a cycle that has now repeated 42 times without stopping. But here is what nobody is talking about. During this latest eruption, vents that had never opened before suddenly cracked open. New fissures, new pathways, as if the volcano is no longer satisfied with the exits it already had and is now carving new ones. Scientists are watching the data, and what they are seeing is a volcano that is not winding down. It is escalating, each episode more extreme than the last, each eruption pushing deeper, hotter, and harder against the ground beneath Hawaii's feet. So the question nobody wants to answer is this: if Kilauea has already erupted 42 times and is still getting stronger, what exactly is it building toward? December 23rd, 2024. That is the date everything changed for Kilauea. Not because the volcano erupted. Kilauea has been erupting on and off for decades, but because on that specific day, something shifted deep beneath the surface. A pattern locked in. And what began that morning has not stopped since. Since December 23rd, Kilauea has unleashed 42 separate eruptive episodes. Not small tremors, not steam vents releasing pressure. Full sustained lava fountaining events, each one powerful enough to reshape the floor of the caldera and push millions of cubic meters of molten rock to the surface. 42 times, back to back, in just over 14 months. Here is what makes that number terrifying. This is not random. This is chaotic. This is a volcano operating on a schedule. Scientists tracking Kilauea's activity have watched each episode follow the same pattern with a predictability that is almost mechanical. Pressure builds beneath the surface. Smaller lava overflows begin. Then the fountaining starts. And then it explodes. Think about what that kind of consistency means. A volcano is not a machine. It does not run on a timer. It does not clock in and clock out. And yet Kilauea has been doing exactly that for over a year, cycling through eruption after eruption, like something underneath Hawaii is pushing with a rhythm that refuses to quit. The scale of what has already been released is staggering. Each episode dumps millions of cubic meters of molten rock into the caldera. Over 42 episodes, the accumulated volume of erupted material has steadily deepened the lava lake, reshaped the summit landscape, and altered the geological structure of one of the most watched volcanoes on the planet. The floor of the caldera is not the same place it was 14 months ago. It has been buried, rebuilt, and buried again. But here is what separates Kilauea's current cycle from anything scientists have studied before. The episodes are not staying the same. They are not leveling off. The numbers are climbing. Fountain heights are increasing. Eruption volumes are growing. What started as a cycle is beginning to look like a buildup. And buildups, in the language of volcanoes, do not end quietly. Episode 42 just set records that Episode 1 could not have touched. So the question that every researcher tracking this mountain is quietly asking is not whether the cycle will continue. It is whether what is coming next will still fit inside the pattern they think they understand. Because so far, Kilauea has given no sign that it is finished. February 15th, 2026, 1:50 in the afternoon. That is the exact moment Episode 42 began. It did not start with an explosion. It never does. It started the way it always starts, with smaller lava overflows creeping across the caldera floor, slow and steady, like the volcano was warming up, testing the exits, checking the pressure. And then, at 1:50 p.m., the fountaining began. What followed in the next few hours would become one of the most extreme eruptive episodes in Kilauea's entire modern record. The first thing that happens when sustained fountaining begins is the height climbs, fast. Within just 22 minutes of the north vent opening up, lava fountains had already punched past 300 feet. 300 feet in under half an hour. That is not a gradual build. That is a volcano releasing stored pressure like a valve that has been held shut for too long. And then it doubled. It took only 10 minutes for the fountain heights to double from that point. Then another 20 minutes to double again from that new height. The math on that is almost impossible to picture. A fountain that starts at 300 feet and doubles twice in under 35 minutes is no longer behaving like a geological event. It is behaving like a detonation in slow motion. By 3 p.m., Kilauea hit its peak. The numbers the instruments recorded at that moment are the kind that stop scientists mid-sentence. The eruption rate reached approximately 780 cubic meters of molten rock per second, every single second. To put that into something you can actually picture, at that rate, Kilauea was producing enough lava to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool every 3.2 seconds. Not every minute, not every 10 seconds, every 3.2 seconds, for hours. At 3 p.m., the highest fontaines of the entire episode were recorded. 1,312 feet of molten rock firing into the Hawaiian sky. The eruptive activity then held steady, almost as if the volcano was pausing to breathe, until 4:50 p.m. when the slow decline finally began. By 11:38 p.m., episode 42 was over. In total, just under 10 hours of sustained eruption had pushed 11.4 million cubic meters of molten rock out of the earth. 11.4 million cubic meters, gone from beneath the surface, added to the top. The caldera floor dropped. The numbers were recorded. And somewhere deep beneath Hawaii, the pressure that had just been released began immediately to rebuild. Episode 43 had already started its clock. 1,312 feet. That number keeps coming up. But until you put it next to something real, it is just a number. The Empire State Building stands 1,250 feet tall. The Eiffel Tower reaches 1,083 feet. One World Trade Center, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, tops out at 1,776 feet. Kilauea's lava fountains on February 15th were taller than two of those three landmarks. Not a building, not steel and concrete engineered over years by thousands of workers. Molten rock, fired out of the earth by pressure alone, reaching heights that would dwarf almost every man-made structure on the planet, and doing it in under 35 minutes. That is what 400 meters of lava fountain actually looks when you hold it next to the world we live in. Now scale that up to the volume. In just under 10 hours, Kilauea released 11.4 million cubic meters of molten rock. 11.4 million. If you took that volume and spread it across Central Park in New York City, it would bury every tree, every path, every open field under more than 50 feet of lava. Every single inch of 843 acres, gone, underneath, in one eruptive episode. But the eruption did not stop at the surface. The energy kept going upward. The eruption plume, the column of gas, ash, and volcanic material that blasted into the atmosphere above the fountains rose to 35,000 feet. That is not ground level. That is cruising altitude for a commercial aircraft. The plume punched through the lower atmosphere and into the zone where passenger jets fly their routes across the Pacific. Airlines do not reroute for small eruptions. They rerouted for this one. The material that fell from that plume was tephra, fragments of solidified lava and volcanic rock raining down from the sky. Thankfully, the wind pushed the fallout southwest into the Kau Desert, unpopulated, remote. A stretch of barren landscape that absorbed the worst of it without a single home in the way. That was not skill. That was luck. Because during the episode immediately before this one, the wind direction was different. Tephra rained down on the populated areas surrounding Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Residents were told to leave. The park closed. People grabbed what they could and drove away from the falling rock. Episode 42 spared the neighborhoods. Episode 41 did not. And with a volcano that has now erupted 42 times in 14 months, the question of which direction the wind blows next time is not a matter of science. It is a matter of chance. For 41 episodes, Kilauea played by its own rules. 2 vents, north and south. That was the pattern. That was the system. Molten rock found its exits, used them, and stayed within the boundaries the volcano had established for itself since December 2024. Scientists knew where to point their cameras. They knew where the fountains would rise. They knew what the eruption would look like before it started because they had watched it 41 times already. Episode 42 changed that. During the peak of February 15th's eruption, something appeared in the data that had not been seen in any of the previous 41 episodes. A third vent. And possibly a fourth. Simultaneously active. Simultaneously pushing lava to the surface alongside the established north and south vents. Not a flicker. Not an instrument error. Sustained fountaining from a location that had never produced sustained fountaining before in this entire eruptive cycle. Read that again. A volcano that had followed the same 2-vent pattern for over a year suddenly opened new exits during its most powerful episode on record. In geology, new vents do not appear without reason. They appear because pressure has found a weakness. Because the pathways that existed before are no longer sufficient to release what is building underneath. Because the system is under more stress than the existing exits can handle. A new vent is not a coincidence. It is the Earth's surface cracking open under load. The implications of that are not subtle. If Kilauea's established vents were enough to release the pressure building beneath Hawaii's summit, new ones would not need to open. The fact that they did, during the highest fountaining event of the entire cycle, suggests that what is accumulating beneath the surface is outpacing the volcano's ability to release it through the channels it has already carved. That is not a volcano settling into a routine. That is a volcano under increasing strain looking for new ways out. And if that idea just stopped you cold, every subscriber on this channel is automatically entered in our monthly giveaway for a branded hoodie. All you have to do is be subscribed. Details are in the description. Back to those vents. Because the story of what actually opened on February 15th is more complicated than it first appears. One of the new openings may not be a true vent at all, and the other one carries a history that makes its reappearance far more significant than scientists initially let on. What exactly cracked open beneath Hawaii on February 15th is a question with 2 very different answers, and both of them are unsettling. 2 new vents. That was the headline. But the reality underneath that headline is more complicated and more alarming than a simple count of openings in the ground. Start with the smaller of the two, the one that appeared weaker, barely recognizable against the sheer volume of lava actively overflowing around it. At first glance, it looked like a new vent punching through fresh ground, but volcanologists studying the footage identified something more specific. What it almost certainly represents is a hornito. That word sounds almost harmless. It is not. A hornito is a false vent, not a genuine new opening in the volcanic system, but something that forms when molten rock gets squeezed upward from beneath the crusted surface of an existing lava flow. Picture a massive river of lava developing a hardened skin on top, while the interior stays liquid and pressurized. When turbulence or constriction builds underneath that crust, the pressure finds the weakest point and punches through. The result looks like a vent. It erupts like a vent. But it is actually the lava flow itself, venting its own internal pressure. When hornitos cool and solidify, they leave behind steep-sided, chimney-like formations on the lava surface. Dramatic evidence of just how much force was moving beneath the surface. Now for the larger of the two new openings, the one producing a genuine sustained lava fountain during episode 42. This one carries two possibilities, and neither is particularly comforting. The first is that it represented a section of the north vent that temporarily forked. A blockage, possibly from falling lava debris collapsing back into the vent itself, split the opening in two instead of maintaining a single continuous channel. Temporary, mechanical, explainable. The second possibility is far more significant. It may represent the reactivation of what scientists call the intermediate vent. A vent that last showed activity during episode 32. 5 months of silence, then suddenly, without warning, active again. If the intermediate vent is truly waking up, the pattern everyone thought they understood is no longer the pattern. 35,000 feet. That is how high Kilauea's eruption plume climbed during episode 42. And that number deserves the same attention as the lava fountains, because what travels inside that plume does not stay above the volcano. When lava fountains reach the heights Kilauea produced on February 15th, they do not just release molten rock, they shatter it. Superheated magma exploding into open-air fragments, into ash, volcanic glass, and tephra, tiny particles of solidified lava that ride the plume upward and then follow the wind wherever it decides to go. At 35,000 feet, that plume was not drifting lazily over the island. It was injecting material into the same atmospheric layer where commercial aircraft operate. The same layer where wind patterns can carry volcanic debris hundreds of miles in hours. On February 15th, the wind cooperated. The plume tracked southwest and deposited its tephra load across the Kilauea Desert. Remote, unpopulated, a vast stretch of hardened lava landscape where nobody lives and nothing was destroyed. The eruption played out against one of the few backdrops on the Big Island where its full fury caused no direct human harm. But here is what that clean outcome actually required. It required the wind to blow in exactly the right direction on exactly the right day. Nothing more, nothing less. Because a prior episode in this same cycle did not get that margin. During that earlier eruption, tephra fell heavily enough over Hawaii Volcanoes National Park that visitors and staff had no choice but to evacuate. People left mid-visit. The park closed. Emergency protocols activated over falling volcanic debris from a volcano that sits at the park center. That episode was frightening. Episode 42 was more powerful. The only difference in outcome was wind direction. There is no infrastructure decision behind that. No early warning system that redirected the plume. No engineering solution that protected the communities downwind. The Kau Desert absorbed Episode 42 because geography and meteorology aligned in Hawaii's favor. That alignment will not always hold. Episode 42 is over. Episode 43 is already coming, and scientists know roughly when. Using the trends Kilauea has established across 42 consecutive eruptive episodes, volcanologists have produced a forecast window for the next eruption. Episode 43 of sustained lava fountaining is expected to begin somewhere between February 27th and March 13th, 2026, a 2-week window for a volcanic eruption. That level of predictability from a system this powerful is something that would have seemed impossible to previous generations of scientists. It should feel like reassurance. It does not, because what that forecast actually confirms is the thing that makes Kilauea unlike almost any other volcano on Earth right now. It is not unpredictable. It is not random. It is operating on a schedule. A pressurized, magma-fed geological schedule that has now delivered 42 eruptions in 14 months without a single extended pause. The system underground is not resting between episodes. It is reloading. Think about what that reloading actually means physically. Between each eruptive episode, magma from deep within the Earth migrates upward through Kilauea's plumbing system, refilling the reservoir that the previous eruption partially drained. The caldera floor, already deepened by the volume released during Episode 42, sits waiting for the next cycle of pressure to build back to the breaking point. 11.4 million cubic meters erupted. More is already on its way up to replace it, and Episode 42 added a new variable that the forecast models have not fully accounted for. New vents. Potentially a reactivated intermediate vent that had been silent for 5 months. When a system this active starts finding new pathways, the 2-week forecast window becomes the least important number in the conversation. The more important question is whether the next episode arrives through the same exits as the last 42, or whether the ground beneath Hawaii opens somewhere new. Predictable and safe are not the same thing. Kilauea has spent 14 months proving exactly that distinction. Episode 43 will prove it again. Kilauea has erupted 42 times since December 2024. It launched lava higher than the Empire State Building. It opened vents that had never been seen before in this cycle. It punched a plume 35,000 feet into the atmosphere. And it is already building toward Episode 43. This is not a volcano that is settling down. It is a volcano that is escalating. Each episode adding new data, new records, and now new openings in the ground that nobody fully predicted. The intermediate vent was silent for 5 months and then reappeared without warning. The forecast window for Episode 43 is already open. The magma is already moving. Hawaii sits on one of the most geologically active hotspots on the entire planet. The ocean floor beneath these islands has been building and breaking for millions of years. What Kilauea is doing right now is not an anomaly in that timeline. It is a continuation of it. The question is not whether Episode 43 will happen. The question is what it brings with it that Episode 42 did not. The mountain is not finished. It has never been finished. And the pattern it is running right now suggests that finished is not anywhere close to what comes next. If stories like this remind you that the Earth operates on its own timeline, completely indifferent to ours, grab your free disaster preparedness toolkit. The link is in the description. Because the next eruption has a forecast window. The one after that will too. And being ready before the window opens is the only margin that actually matters. Kilauea will erupt again. The only thing still unknown is what it looks like when it does.